of ours was made up of Europe's outcast, Asia's outcast, and Africa's outcast. The outcasts, the people who couldn't find land, couldn't find work, and the old world came to the new. That's still a tough issue because this country is fighting strongly now over why can't we just let anybody in who wants to come in, and others say no, we got to keep certain people out, we let them come in legally, let them come in according to the law. Others say no, let them just walk in. That's an issue. For 200 years, Rome boasted of Pax Romana, a Roman peace. After all the civil wars they had, I mean, it's kind of deserved. And it was during this time that Christianity began. All right. Now, some things I want to say about Rome. Oh yes, they assumed that there was a law, a natural law. Their law was written on 12 tables. And they assumed that there was natural law that everybody could know just by doing a little bit of thinking. In other words, it was wrong to steal from your neighbor because, well, because it's wrong, not because any God said it was, but we philosophically they came to feel like we shouldn't steal from our neighbor, we shouldn't go around killing people. It's called natural law. Unfortunately, the 12 tables did not tell how the leaders were to be chosen, did not tell how the emperor was to be picked. And so that was one of the things that was lacking in their natural law. Originally, now, the family. Originally, the family was male-dominated. Marriages often occurred early. But as time went on, the man lost his influence in the home, and his authority became less and less. At one time, the father had a right to kill his sons if the sons did not toe the line and line up. But then as time went on, that became illegal. And a lot among the rich, among the poor, we don't think it happened. Among the rich, a lot of rich people killed their sons. King Herod over here killed 3 of his 6 sons, and when Caesar Augustus signed his 3rd death warrant for the 3rd of Herod's sons, he said, I'd rather be Herod's hog than Herod's son. The Latin word he used for hog is similar to the word for son. I'd rather be Herod's hog than Herod's son. But anyway, as time went on, the male dominance became less and less. And the women became more and more independent. I am going to have a little bit more to say about that in a little bit. At first, when they started out, divorce was uncommon. But then as time went on, divorce became the natural order of things. And there came to be an increase in the number of bachelors and old maids. Caesar Augustus saw this, and he tried to put a special tax on bachelors. I mean, we do the same thing in our country, folk. If I was single, I was 39, and I can tell you, I paid a higher rate of taxes as a single person than I did after I married and had 3 children. But now that 2 of my children moved out of the house, and one of them is older than 26, I can't claim them as dependents anymore. So my tax rate will go up. But he tried to tax single people higher than married people. He actually did tax them. But it did not help. Their men and women stopped liking each other. This, I think, and this was something I did not pick up in the paper I wrote 53 or 54 years ago, but this contributed greatly to the downfall of the Roman Empire. Their men and women did not like each other, their population. And the one thing your book says you can prove about Rome, they had a big population decline from possibly 50 million to 30 million, which is a really, really big decline, when the population really should have been going up. As for divorce, the rich were far more likely to divorce than the poor. If you think that applies to our country, we in our country value 3 things highly in choosing a marriage partner: looks, personality, and money. news for you. Not any one of those three have anything at all to do with making a marriage work. Things like character, consistency, commitment, they'll make a marriage work. Three big C's there. And character is a trait that's, I fear, is severely lacking in our country today. But anyway, divorce became more and more common as time went on, and again, the rich seemed to have been led away. Cicero's daughter only lived 33 years or so, was married twice, divorced twice, and died unmarried. No children. Your book mentions that as just one example. Again, all this thing was eventually to lead to the empire collapsing.
Do you think also that the population declined because there was a lot of homosexuality? Because they weren't together and making more children?
All right, I'm gonna. You've hit on a topic that I'm going to admit. You might not think I'm going to admit I'm a little bit afraid of. I'm going to let you. You're the one who said it. I'm going to leave it. I mean, okay. Well, what she said was that did homosexuality lead to a decline in population, lead to the downfall of the Roman Empire? This has been told by many, many a person who has studied the issue. And again, if you think I'm scared of the topic, you are right. I really am. It's a really, really loaded topic right now. A really super loaded topic. And I'd just rather not go there too, even though I do mention it from time to time. The Romans blamed the Greeks for making them homosexual because they said they conquered and made Greek slaves, the Greek slaves made them that way. And yes, it possibly led to the empire collapsing and falling. All right, I'll leave that. Like I said I would. All right. The wars had done a lot to make the women more independent. And then when the wars were over, they asserted them enough. During the Vietnam War, we had a lot of men who were taken prisoner. And then after years, a bunch of prisoners were released in January 1973. Some of them had their wives waiting for them, but some of them, they were told, some of the prisoners, here, come here, and we know you're going to need counseling. And they told them in the best way they could, your wife is taken up with another man, or your wife does not want you back. But in most cases, their wives had become so independent that the men, I mean, this was in the men had gone off to war in the early 1960s when women were more dependent than they are now. Then they came home to an independent wife, and a lot of them just, divorce was really high among the men who returned to Vietnam as prisoners of war. And again, the Romans had the same problem. The women became more independent, and the men could not stand it. Now, I ask you on the syllabus to look, to consider, from on the syllabus, what happens to societies when they make their women more and more equal to men? And here's where I mean, you can call me sexist if you want to, but folks, this is what I see as a fact. The societies that keep the women under subjection rise up. When the women become equal, the society becomes more primitive and uncivilized. Now, if that's sexist, make the most of it.
I'm sure that's the definition.
I mean, I'm sure that's the definition of sexism. I'm sure. But, folks, the issue is it true? Never mind whether it's sexist or not, is it the truth? Now, again, it might be. It might What's that?
Are there any facts in that? Just because, let's say Saudi Arabia just allowed their women to actually be able to drive cars now, I don't see their socioeconomic status higher than the United States, where women are actually equal here.
Keep in mind, European Christianity, both Catholic and Protestant, called for keeping women under subjection. Women have only become, I mean, all right, even when I was a kid, the women were expected to be under subjection. I mean, I'm only 69 years old. But they were teaching women placed as under subjection, even, and the churches were teaching it even in the early 1980s. The churches were teaching it more. So basically the women equality is a fairly recent thing in this country. And the final chapter, to me, is not yet written.
But the government forced women to be more independent in the United States during the Vietnam War because of the consistent ads of having women to actually go out and do all the men jobs that the men were required to do because they had to actually go fight over in the war in Vietnam. So it forced women to be
World
out
War
of
I
their
and World War II is even more so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it forced women to be out of their comfortable state.
Forced,
to
yeah,
actually
they did.
be
I mean,
more
the
independent.
same thing with Rome. The wars forced their women to become independent. But the Roman society went under. I mean, it took hundreds of years. It took 300 or 400 years for Rome to actually fall. So like I say, the final chapter is not yet written.
What about all the technical advance,
Oh, that makes it
advancements
different.
and-
Okay, that's what we'll fool a lot of. We think, I mean, I had a student sit right there a couple years ago and he said, Nathan, teacher. He later wrote me a really nice letter, which I still have, a nice compliment, which he sent Ira about me. He said, the United States cannot be conquered. Nobody in the class agreed with that, especially me. There's no group of people that can't be conquered. If we ever get weak enough to where our enemies come in, take everything we have, and sell us off to foreign countries, one of us to China, one of us to India, one of us to Russia, one of us to France, and one of us to Brazil, sell us off as slaves. That doesn't happen. Yes, it does. Most of the world still legalizes slavery in one form or another. Big part of the world has legalized slavery. It still can happen. All right. Okay, I've said as much as I want to about that. Slaves, that's the next issue. Slaves, big part of Roman society. They had slave rebellions. The biggest slave rebellion was Spartacus's rebellion. There have been movies made about this. Spartacus's rebellion, he led a rebellion and wound up some 6,000 followers were crucified, including Spartacus himself. He was a slave and started a rebellion, and it took the Roman army. The problem with slave rebellions, and this was true even in history, they could not get every slave to join. And eventually some slave would like his master enough to betray the rebellion. But also, among the upper classes, they knew, here's the emperor, and under him is the general this, and under him is colonel that, and under the colonel was the major, under the major was the captains. They knew they had an organization. The slaves would spend their time fighting over, I want to be leader, I can lead better than you, you decide, I'm going to lead. This happened too much among slave people. And it happened among Spartacus, because not every one of the people who followed him accepted his leadership. He was crucified long before it put the people of Rome to terror. Well, eventually, when the wars ended, slavery declined. Now that was a painful tragedy because a person might be a slave for 15 years. Well, 15 years would go by fairly quickly, and all of a sudden, one day, the slave was required to be turned loose. He's paid his dues. Then all of a sudden, the wife would have to do the work that was done by the slave. And the husband might have to pitch in. And this was really hard on her. There just were no slaves to go around. The few slaves who were became really, really high priced. Yes?
Question. Also, is it true that the highborns were also being sold into slavery as they were being conquered?
What's that?
The highborns were being sold into slavery too as they were being conquered, or were they being just killed?
The high.
The highborns, like if the
Oh.
highborns were taken over or conquered by another.
Yeah, they enslaved upper crust people too.
Okay.
Yeah, they would, particularly the Carthage. See, when the war, now, a lot of time though, your upper crust people would be enslaved in Caesar's household. No, they would not be enslaved by a commoner. The educated slaves could eventually work their way to freedom, and your more industrious slaves would work with freedom. But eventually, where the war is not going on, Most of the slaves, by the way, came from wars. Now, some slaves came from people who had done bad deeds and were forced into slavery for bad deeds, but after a while, there were no slaves left, and the few slaves there were cost more than the ordinary person can afford. So slavery became less and less as time went on. Now, there came about a polarization of society. The rich were very, 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 very rich, and then the poor became extremely poor with no middle class. The middle class disappeared from Rome. That has not happened to us yet. Some people were fearing it would, but we still have people in the middle who are neither very, very rich nor very poor. We have safeguards built in to kind of prevent that, but if there was another big stock market crash, nobody knows for sure what would happen, and a lot of people think, yes, this could happen. Now, another part of their society, the gladiatorial shows, I'm going to give you a break. Gladiators were men who would fight to the death. If a gladiator won enough fights, he'd be given his freedom. But the crowd would gather around, and when one gladiator would through another one, the victorious would put his hand on a fallen's neck and look around the crowd. If the crowd voted thumbs up, that meant spare that man. If the crowd voted thumbs down, the victorious gladiator would expect to kill that man. Now, do you think they love brutality in sports? I have to say this is what my 8th grade teacher said, our sports are getting more and more brutal as time goes on. Especially with football, we have men who move faster than football players once did who are bigger. And it's now been proven that practically every pro football player is going to suffer brain damage in his later life. This was done in a study, and nobody contested it. And most of your college football players wind up having aches and pains that last. I mean, okay, I worked at Lockheed with a man who played for one of the small, the University of Toledo. Not a big powerhouse, but he played football at University of Toledo. And he was in constant pain day and night from injuries that piled up, where you get this re-injured over and over again. Basketball is supposed to be a non-contact sport, but you watch those men when they go after that ball for the rebound. Look at them closely. Hockey is ridiculous. Ridiculous to the point of being ridiculous as far as the violence that goes on in a hockey game. Do we Americans love brutality in sports? Maybe not the extent yet the Romans did, but are we following in their footsteps? Okay, folk, I got carried away a little bit. Be back about 1:30, probably 11:35.